brother snapped. You make us look bad. As if their behavior hadn't already done that without my help. He was standing over me in my parents' lounge room, arms crossed so tightly his biceps looked like they were trying to escape his skin. The TV was on mute behind him, some Saturday afternoon cooking show flickering away like a joke in the background. My mum was on the edge of the couch, hands clasped in her lap, eyes darting between us like she was watching a tennis match she'd bet money on. Dad had taken his usual armchair throne, legs spread, jaw working, saying nothing but radiating disapproval so strong I could feel it prickling against my skin. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I didn't dare look at it. My heart was doing that fast, hummingbird thing, and my tongue felt too big for my mouth. I didn't make you look anything. I managed, my voice sounding oddly flat in my own ears. I just told the truth. My fingers were wrapped around a mug of tea Mum had given me when I walked in, already gone cold because the "let's have a talk as a family" ambush started before I even sat down properly. My palms were sweating. I could feel the ceramics slipping slightly with each tremor in my hands. My brother took a step closer like he thought he could physically intimidate the narrative back into place. You posted about us, he said. You told your little internet strangers that we're abusive. Do you have any idea how that makes us look? Behind him, Dad grunted in agreement. Mum made a small wounded sound. I stared at the pattern on the rug so I wouldn't start crying. It was a Sunday, mid-afternoon, which in my family means prime time for pretending we're normal people who have normal coffee catch-ups. Except this time the invitation had the extra line of death. We need to clear the air about some things you've been saying. I'm 29 now. I started therapy 1.5 years ago. 2 weeks ago, after a particularly brutal session where my therapist asked, "What would it be like to tell your story without minimizing it?" I made a throwaway anonymous post on a support forum. Nothing identifying, no names, no locations. Just me, trying to put words around growing up in a house where silence was a weapon and shouting was the soundtrack. Someone from our extended family apparently stumbled across a screenshot of it, put 2 and 2 together, and sent it to my mum with a helpful, "Is this my name?" message. Cue hurricane. Let me rewind a bit, because I know how this reads. Another millennial blaming their parents for everything. Or whatever. If you want that take, you can click away now. I'm not here to convince anyone. I mostly just need to get this out of my chest so it stops bouncing around my ribcage at 3 a.m. I'm the middle child. My brother, Sam, is 2 years older. My sister, Lily, is 5 years younger. From the outside, we were a pretty typical family. Dad worked in construction, Mum did part-time admin and full-time martyrdom, kids did well in school, church on Sundays, Christmas photos and matching outfits if Mum could bully us into it. On the inside, it felt like living in a house where everything was on a dimmer switch except anger. Sam was the golden child, no question. Tall, athletic, respectful, Reed knew how to kiss ass and keep his opinions to himself. He played footy, got decent grades, never rocked the boat in front of other adults. Teachers loved him. Aunties called him such a good boy. Dad treated him like a mini-me/unpaid apprentice. When Sam messed up it was, "Boys will be boys," and "We all make mistakes." I was not that. I was the kid with attitude. The one who asked too many questions. The one who cried when things felt unfair, which was often. The one who said, at 9 years old, "That hurt my feelings," and got told, "Well, don't have such soft feelings then." I wasn't a perfect kid. I was mouthy sometimes, sulked, slammed a door or two, but I learned very quickly that anything I did that didn't fit the role of grateful child was going to be used as proof that I was the problem, not the dynamic. Lily was the baby. By the time she came along, Mum was exhausted and Dad was drinking more. Lily learned to disappear into books and headphones. She and I were closer in temperament, but there's enough of an age gap that I spend more time trying to shield her than relating as equals. Growing up, "You're making us look bad," was basically our family motto. If I cried in a supermarket. You're making me look bad. If I didn't want to hug some relative I barely knew. You're embarrassing us. If I told the teacher I was tired because there'd been a huge fight at home the night before. Don't you dare air our dirty laundry. Image was everything. One of the first times Sam used that line on me, I was 13. We were at a cousin's birthday party. I'd overheard Dad telling one of the uncles. You know how girls are, always emotional. And something in me snapped enough to say, maybe they're emotional because everyone tells them to shut up all the time. It wasn't even that brave. I muttered it under my breath. Unfortunately, Dad heard. He turned on me in front of everyone. What did you say? I froze. The room went quiet, the way family gatherings do when someone senses drama brewing. I stared at the plastic tablecloth, heart pounding. Nothing, I said. He stepped closer. No, you clearly have something to say. Go on, share your wisdom with us. I could feel my face burning. I just meant, it's not fair, I mumbled. Dad let out a harsh laugh. You think life is fair? You think you're hard done by? You don't know how good you have it. Keep up that mouth and see how good you have it when you're out on the street. Mum fluttered around, laughing nervously. Oh, ignore her, she's at that age. While the relatives did that awkward chuckle people do when they're complicit but uncomfortable. I escaped to the bathroom and locked the door, heart beating against my ribs like it wanted to break out. A minute later, someone knocked. It's me, Sam said. I opened the door, hopeful he'd maybe say something comforting. He slipped inside, closed it behind him, and hissed. What is wrong with you? You always have to make a scene. I didn't. You embarrassed Dad in front of everyone, he snapped. You made us look bad. I stared at him, blinking back tears. He embarrassed me, I said, soft but stubborn. He rolled his eyes. You're so dramatic. Just shut up and apologize so we can get through the night without another blow-up. That set the tone for the next 15 years. Dad did the big explosions, Mum did the guilt trips, and Sam did the cleanup, except the cleanup usually involved telling me it was my fault the bomb went off. He was good at it. That's the thing I wish wasn't true. He had this way of leaning in, lowering his voice, and making his logic sound so reasonable. If you just didn't push his buttons, if you weren't so sensitive, if you didn't bring stuff up at the worst times, it was easier, in some twisted way, to believe him than to stare down the fact that the two people in charge of our safety were also the ones compromising it. Meanwhile, my anxiety ramped up like someone was slowly turning a dial every year. By 16, I was having heart palpitations before family dinners. By 18, I'd perfected the art of being fine in public and then sobbing in the shower where the noise of the water covered it. I didn't have language for any of it. Mental health, in our house, was something other people had, usually. Weak people, Mum liked to say. We didn't have time for depression in my day. Dad's take was, you just have to get on with it. When I suggested seeing a counselor after having what I now know was a panic attack in the middle of my HSC exams, Mum said, people will think we didn't raise you right. Sam chimed in with, you don't need a shrink, you need to stop overthinking everything. So I didn't go. I white-knuckled my way through exams instead, alternately studying and staring at the ceiling, imagining future versions of myself who were relaxed and happy and had no idea how to get from here to there. I moved out at 21 under the socially acceptable banner of moving closer to work. That was partly true. I did get a job in the city. But if I'm honest, the main reason was that my body physically could not take living in that house anymore. I'd come home from work, hear the TV blaring and Dad yelling at the news, and my heartbeat would spike before I even opened the door. I'd lie awake listening for footsteps, doors, the creak of someone coming down the hall. I'd wake up already tired. Leaving helped. It also broke something. Mum cried and told everyone I was abandoning the family. Dad called me ungrateful. Sam was weirdly distant about it. No big speech, just a tight hug and a "Don't make them more upset than they already are, okay?" From the outside, after that, I was doing well. I had a small sharehouse room, a half-decent job, friends who thought I was funny and hardworking. I learned to cook, badly at first, then well enough. I slept, better though still shallow. I startle easily. Loud male voices make my shoulders creep up. But I wasn't constantly on edge, which felt like a miracle. The thing about distance, though, is that it gives you space to start asking questions you can't ask when you're in survival mode. Questions like, "Is it normal to be this scared of going home for Christmas?" And, "Was it really my fault Dad threw that plate?" My friend Maya was the first person I admitted anything to. We were both drunk on cheap wine, sitting on her tiny balcony, sharing stories about weird family stuff. I told her about my dad punching a hole in the pantry door when I was 10 because I bought the wrong brand of cereal, and about Mom not speaking to me for 3 days when I said I didn't want to go to church one week. She put her glass down gently and said, "Hey, you know that's not normal, right?" I did the usual tap dance. Yeah, but they were stressed. They had it rough. They never hit us like some parents do. They always put food on the table. It wasn't like abuse. "You're literally shaking just talking about it," she pointed out. "Something doesn't have to be the worst possible thing to be bad enough." That sentence lodged in my brain like a pebble in a shoe. I couldn't stop noticing it after that. The way my body reacted to certain phrases, the way my mum's name on my phone screen made my stomach drop, the way I'd emotionally brace myself before I stepped into their house. I finally caved and saw a GP. I went in for stress, and ended up crying in his office for 20 minutes about never feeling safe. He referred me to a psychologist. I almost didn't go. My parents' voices were so loud in my head it was like they were sitting behind me in the waiting room. But I did. Therapy was confronting. Not in the cliché. My therapist told me to forgive my parents. Way. More in the. She kept gently asking, "And how old were you when that happened?" And every time I answered, I realized how small I actually was. Way. We spent a couple of sessions doing what she called mapping your story without minimizing. She'd stop me when I said things like, "It wasn't that bad," or "Other people had it worse," and ask, "Is that what you actually feel, or is that what you tell yourself to make it bearable?" At one point, after I described a night where Dad had come home drunk, shouted that we were all useless, threw a chair, and then passed out on the couch, she said very calmly, "That's domestic violence." I flinched. "No, he didn't hit anyone," I protested immediately. "Throwing objects, punching walls, screaming threats, making kids feel unsafe, those are all forms of violence," she said. "Your body doesn't know the difference between a fist coming towards you and a fist hitting the wall next to you. It just registers danger." Something cracked inside me. Not all at once, not a dramatic shattering, more like a hairline fracture in a cup that had been holding boiling water too long. I didn't tell my family I was in therapy. I didn't owe them that. But I did start putting subtle boundaries in place: fewer visits, shorter phone calls, not answering every time they rang right away. When Mum guilted me for missing a Sunday lunch, I said, "I'm really busy, and I'm also trying to take care of my mental health." She said, "We didn't have mental health in my day, we just got on with it," and then cried about how cold I'd become. Sam's line was, "You're overcomplicating things. They're not that bad. You make them sound like monsters." Maybe that's why I made the post. It wasn't even on Reddit, actually. It was on one of those anonymous confessions boards. I made a throwaway and typed for the better part of an hour, hands shaking, about growing up with parents who thought screaming was a love language and a brother who acted like my reaction to the screaming was the real problem. I hit post. It was read by strangers. Some of them said, "Same." Some said, "That's abuse." Some said, "I'm sorry you went through that." That last one made me cry in a way I didn't expect. No one in my actual family had ever said that. I didn't give identifying details, but trauma has a weirdly specific flavor. Someone, my cousin, I later found out, recognized enough of the dynamics, screenshotted it, and sent it to my mum with, "I think this might be about you guys." Mum called me in tears. "How could you?" was basically the thesis statement. How could I air our dirty laundry? How could I make them look like abusers? How could I humiliate them like that after everything they'd done for me? Dad got on the line long enough to bark, "You're ungrateful," before hanging up. Then Sam texted, "We need to talk. Come over Sunday." So there I was, sitting on their couch, cold tea in hand, being told I made them look bad for describing, in anonymous terms, what it felt like to grow up here. "You don't deny it happened," I said now, looking at my brother rather than my dad, because I had a better chance of being heard. "You're angry that I talked about it." He scoffed. "I deny that it happened the way you wrote it," he said. "You made it sound like you lived in some horror movie. Like we're all traumatizing you all the time. It's not fair." Fair. That word. "I wrote about how I experienced things," I said. "I didn't use your names. I didn't say where we lived. I just needed to talk about it without being told I was imagining it." Mum cut in, voice trembling. "We gave you everything," she said. "We worked our fingers to the bone to keep a roof over your head. I went without new shoes for years so you could go on school excursions. And this is how you repay us? By telling the world we're monsters?" "I never called you monsters," I said quietly. "But that's what people will think," she shot back. "They'll think we were terrible parents, and we weren't. We did our best. It wasn't good enough," I blurted before I could stop myself. The room went dead silent. Even the TV seemed to freeze mid-frame. Dad sat forward slowly. "What did you say?" he asked. His voice was low, dangerous. My heart hammered, but I forced myself to hold his gaze. "I said your best still hurt me," I said. "You can say you did your best and admit that it wasn't enough to keep me safe, emotionally. Those things can both be true." Sam shook his head like I'd suggested the earth was flat. "You're rewriting history," he said. "You had a good childhood. Maybe it wasn't perfect, but whose is? You make it sound like all we did was scream and break things." I laughed, short and humorless. "I wrote 3 paragraphs about my dad pulling us out of bed at midnight to yell about the electricity bill," I said. "I could have written a book." Mum gasped. "See, that's exactly what I mean," she cried. "You twist everything." He was stressed, he'd had a long day. "And I was 10. I said. "I was 10 years old, standing in the hallway in my pajamas being told I was going to bankrupt the family because I liked to read with the light on. And look how well you turn out," Dad said sharply, like that ended the argument. "You're successful. You have a good job. We must not have done that bad." I wanted to scream. "I turned out this way in spite of you, not because you," I wanted to say. "And I'm still on medication and in therapy, so maybe don't pat yourself on the back yet." What I actually said was, "I'm not here to debate whether I'm allowed to feel the way I feel. I came because you said you wanted to talk. So talk." Sam pinched the bridge of his nose like I was giving him a headache. "Okay, fine," he said. "From our side, it feels like you've gone nuclear. Instead of talking to us, you go to some shrink, and now everything is trauma and boundaries and abuse. You've turned our family into your little project. And when you post that stuff online, you make us look like abusers. It affects us. It affects how people see us at church, at work. We have to answer questions now." "Good," slipped out of my mouth before my brain filtered it. His head snapped up. "Good?" I swallowed. "If people are asking questions, maybe you'll actually have to look at what happened instead of pretending it was just strict parenting." "You think we're abusers?" Mum said it like a statement, not a question. Her eyes were huge, shiny, accusatory. "I think what happened in this house was abusive," I said, choosing my words carefully. I think I grew up scared of you. I think that's messed up. I think throwing things, threatening to kick your kid out, reading their diary, mocking them for crying, making them responsible for your emotions, that's not healthy. Dad's face darkened. We never hit you, he said. Not like our parents did us. You don't know what abuse is. There it was. The generational baton. We had it worse, so you can't complain. You're right, I said softly. You had it worse. And instead of breaking the cycle, you just changed the shape of it. Mum burst into tears. Sam groaned. Dad stood up suddenly, chair scraping loudly. My whole body tensed. My muscles remembered this posture, this sound. I subtly shifted my feet so I could move if I had to. I'm not going to sit here and be called an abuser by my own child, he said. You're not being called anything, I said, voice shaking now. I'm describing how I felt. If the shoe fits, I trailed off. This is what your therapist put in your head, Mum sobbed. She's turned you against us. My therapist listened while I told her stories that made her cry, I said. She didn't hypnotize me into believing anything. She just didn't interrupt to tell me I was ungrateful. Sam slammed his hand down on the back of the couch. You're so dramatic, he snapped. You always have to take things to the extreme. You could have just said, hey, some stuff in my childhood hurt me, can we talk about it, instead of going around telling the world we're monsters. I did try to talk, I said. I could hear my voice rising, but I barely cared anymore. I tried for years. You told me I was sensitive. You told me to get over it. You told me not to make a fuss. Every time I cried, I was attention-seeking. Every time I said something was unfair, I was disrespectful. The only place I could talk without being shut down was with strangers. He opened his mouth, closed it, then went for the jugular. You just want pity. He spat. You love being the victim. You love people telling you how brave you are. You make us look bad so you can look good. That landed like a physical blow because a part of me had believed that for a long time. That I was somehow milking it, that my hurt was a performance. I took a breath, and through my nose like Hannah taught me, feeling my ribs expand against the tightness. No, I said quietly. I want to not wake up in a cold sweat because I heard a car door slam outside. I want to be able to answer my phone without rehearsing the conversation in my head first. I want to come home, if I choose to, and not feel like I'm volunteering to be put on trial. That's what I want. Mum sniffed, wiping her eyes. We're trying, she said again, in a smaller voice. We're going to that workshop thing. Your father hasn't raised his voice as much. We're learning. Isn't that what you wanted? It's part of it, I said. But it doesn't erase what happened. And it doesn't mean I have to lie about it to protect your image. Sam let out a disbelieving laugh. So that's it? You're just going to keep telling everyone we're abusers? I'm going to keep telling the truth about my life, I said. If that makes you look bad, maybe look at why, not at me. He stared at me for a long second, eyes hard. You make us look bad, he repeated, quieter this time, like a mantra. You already did that all by yourselves, I said, and my voice was steadier than I felt. After that, the conversation kind of fell apart. Dad stormed out, muttering about disrespect. Mum cycled between crying and listing all the sacrifices she'd made, how no one appreciates her. Sam kept pacing, throwing in little comments about me. Loving drama. At some point, I realized there was nothing more to say that would suddenly make them go, you know what? You're right. We sucked. That's not how this works outside of fantasy Reddit threads. Real people rarely have the big epiphany in front of you. So I stood up, placed my still untouched tea in the sink, and said, I'm going to go. Mum looked up, horrified. You're leaving? Just like that? After dropping this bomb on us? It's not a bomb, I said. It's me stepping out of the way of the fallout for once. That doesn't even make sense. Sam snapped. It does to me, I said. I grabbed my bag. My hands were shaking so much I nearly dropped my keys. As I headed to the door, Sam called after me. You're going to regret this when you're alone and nobody wants you because of how difficult you are. That one hurt more than I'd like to admit. There's a little voice in my head that's been saying something similar for years. No one else will put up with you. I paused with my hand on the doorknob. People who actually love me already do, I said over my shoulder. And they don't need me to lie about my past to feel okay about themselves. Then I walked out. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. My legs felt like jelly. I sat in my car and shook for a bit before I could even put the key in the ignition. I texted Hannah, had a big fight with my family. I didn't minimize. I feel like I'm going to throw up. She replied a few minutes later, because she's annoyingly good at being available in crises. I'm sorry it was hard. I'm proud of you for standing by your experience. Breathe. Drink some water. We'll process this in session. It's been 3 weeks since that conversation. In that time, I've had 5 missed calls from Mom. She leaves voicemails that start with, I'm just so worried about you, and end with, I can't believe you do this to us. One short, curt text from Dad that says, You owe your mother an apology. Several long texts from Sam, alternating between anger. You've destroyed this family. And faux reason. You're seeing everything through a negative lens because of therapy. Why don't you stop going for a bit and see if you feel better? One message from Lily that just said, I'm sorry. I love you. I'm still here. That last one is the one I keep rereading. Because she was a kid in that house too. Because she saw more than they think she did. Because maybe, just maybe, the next generation doesn't have to be built on pretending everything was fine. I haven't responded to most of the others yet. I've written and deleted about a dozen drafts. Everything I write either sounds too harsh or too conciliatory. I don't want to throw stones. I also don't want to crawl back and say, You're right, I overreacted, just to make the tension stop. The thing that keeps spinning in my head is that line, You make us look bad. I've realized how much of my life has been organized around not making them look bad. Keeping secrets. Laughing off comments. Downplaying how anxious I am. Showing up to family events even when every cell in my body is screaming no, because what will people think if you're not there? But telling the truth isn't an act of image vandalism. Their behavior already did that. I didn't make my dad punch holes in doors. I didn't make my mum tell me she wished she'd never had kids. I didn't make my parents threaten to throw me out at 16 if I didn't get with the program. I didn't make them snoop through my phone, mock my body, or ignore my cries for help. All I did was say, This happened, and it hurt me. If that makes them look bad, that's not a reflection on me. It's a reflection they don't want to look into. I don't know how this ends. Maybe we'll end up low contact, exchanging polite texts on holidays. Maybe they'll double down and tell everyone I'm the ungrateful, mentally ill child who destroyed the family. Maybe in some distant future, my brother will sit in a therapist's office and say, I spent years policing my siblings' emotions so I didn't have to look at my own. And something will crack open in him. For now, I'm focusing on small, boring acts of rebellion, going to therapy, taking my meds, answering Lily's messages, telling my friends the unpolished version when they ask how I am. Writing long, messy posts like this to strangers on the internet who might say, Same, and make me feel a little less crazy. If anyone reading this grew up being told, You make us look bad. Here's the thing I wish someone had said to me earlier, You are not responsible for how the truth looks on other people. If it fits like an accusation, that's because they put it on themselves. Your job is not to twist yourself into knots to make their reflection prettier. I'm still scared. My heart still races when my phone lights up with Mom or Sam. I still have that reflex of wanting to explain myself into being understood. But underneath the fear, there's a tiny, stubborn sense of relief. like I've finally stopped holding my breath. Maybe that's what healing is, in families like mine. Not everyone holding hands in a circle saying, "We're all better now," but one person, maybe two, stepping out of the spotlight that was never theirs and saying, "No. I'm not going to be your scapegoat anymore. They can keep saying I make them look bad. I'll keep telling the truth anyway."